So here it is. Read the embarrassing change shaping futures audit and assurance. Read the mind of an AA future audit assurance marker. Okay. So far so good. Here are the contents. We do not need to look at the uh, content. So introduction. I'm a member of the team who will mark audit and assurance. Okay. This article is designed to give you the candidate insight into my mind so that you can better understand what a marker will be looking for when it comes to marking your audit and assurance script. So, insight into a marker's thinking, appreciation, what we are trying to look for it, what for the reasons why marks may not be awarded will help you fulfill your potential and gain the necessary marks to pass. Okay, and so far so we'll now move on. Question number one. Question number 17, part B of question number 17 uses a very common style of requirement, namely to describe audit risk and explain the auditor's response to each risk. Here the question called for 8 risk and responses. It is important to plan your time to give only the required number of risks, even though the scenario will always contain more than the specified number. Okay, so observation on the requirement. These the 16 marks reflect the fact that each risk response is worth 2 marks, which will be awarded as follows: for each identification of each audit risk, half mark each; for explanation of each risk, half mark; for an appropriate auditor's response to each risk, 1 mark; to explain an audit risk necessary to state relevant to the financial statement, assertion that is a fact, whether amounts could be over, under, misstated, or the effect on the inherent control or detection risk. So, an auditor's response is an approach the audit team will take to address the identified risk. It does not have to be a detailed audit procedure discussed with management is not sufficient to deal with any identified risk. You will have to apply your knowledge of audit procedures to provide a valid response, which would adequately address the risk identified. You will see when you look at the marked answers in this article, it is not possible to achieve a pass mark to such questions by a mere statement of knowledge. It must be tailored to the specific scenario provided. Okay. See this part, what it's saying that you must, uh, if you only focus on the knowledge, you will not pass. You have to connect that knowledge with the scenario to pass. Okay. And here it is. Now, so far, so good. So, here it is. Look at the question now. Here it is. See, inventory count is made up of the purchase price of new raw materials and cost of conversion, including uh, labor, production, and general overheads. Okay, under IS2, inventory should be measured at lower of cost and realizable value. Auditor's response. Inventory cost should only include the cost of raw materials. The auditors should obtain a breakdown and recalculate inventory in compliance with IS2. Okay. Number two, half marks here we get. Here we get half marks. So why so? Let's see. Why so? Relevant. Here is the relevant point here. The note one. Credit for identifying that there is a risk associated with the inventory. However, the statement of IS 12, IS to acknowledge is not relevant to the specific risk concerning inclusion of general overheads or inventory should be valued is not an auditor's response and the statement is incorrect. To calculate inventory correctly is management's responsibility, not an auditor's responsibility. Now, Number two, inventory is held in three warehouses located across the country. It is impossible for the auditor for the auditor, okay, for the auditor, it is impossible for the auditors to attend all the inventory counts. In addition, the cost of the travel is not worth the benefit. So, auditor should attend inventory counts in warehouse that has an history of having its inventory misstated, or the warehouse with the most material amount of inventory. Zero marks. Well, no marks awarded as the number of the warehouse is not the issue. Okay. Third point, the purchase of the patent. The 1.1 million has been expensed in the current year. Statement of profit or loss, the classification was not properly done. The expense was overstatement, and the you know expense was overstatement, and the patent intangible asset was understated. Auditor should assess whether the criteria of IS 38 intangible assets have been met. Auditor may need to rely on an expert. Well, here, full mark awarded for identifying a risk and correctly stating its effect on the financial statement. However, suggested response is not linked to the risk, and the auditor would not need to rely on an expert. So, only one mark awarded. Okay. Then, BlackBerry raised 1.2 million through issuing shares at a premium. Is the share issue properly approved by the board of BlackBerry? Well, auditor should review the board minutes to ensure the authorization to issue there is properly approved, and also trace to the bank statement to enhance the receipt of 1.2 million. Again, one mark only, because credit for identifying that there is a risk associated with the issue of shares at a premium. However, the risk did not concern approval, and hence review of board minute is not a relevant response. Credit given for the confirming the receipt of the share proceeds. Now, moving ahead, a significant teaming and leading fraud was discovered. There is a risk that some fraud hasn't been correctly detected and receivables may be understated. Auditor should discuss with management how the fraud occurred, and also inquire into proposed actions to be taken to prevent similar occurrence in the future. Half mark. Okay, so is the 6 point. The fund was stolen by four members of the sales ledger department as they allocated later customer receipts against the older receivable. This is the risk that the receivables may be overvalued. As a fraud occurred relating to the receivables, auditor has to 100% as receivables, the auditor has to make an adjustment to the financial statement if necessary to ensure the appropriate receivables amount as at year end 31st March, exit half mark. So this is a continuation of the risk identified in the previous point. Credit is given here for correctly identifying the risk as overstatement of receivables. No mark given for a financial statement. Is management responsible? As in note 1, notes that even if an appropriate response had been given here, it would not be given further credit because the mark for the response to the risk has already been awarded. Okay. Now, the BlackBerry decided to outsource its sales ledger department to an external service. The reliance on the external service has to be questioned, as this can be damage the reputation of BlackBerry. Discuss with finance director the technical expertise of the external company. The auditor should also review the agreement between both companies. Half mark. And the final here, in this case, the credit for the financial accountant of the BlackBerry tweeted, uh, threatened to sue the company for unfair dismissal. There is an increased risk of losses as compensation may be significant. So auditor should make an inquiry to BlackBerry lawyer about the status and the possible outcome of the case. If BlackBerry is likely to lose the case, then a provision should be made under IS 37. Again, half mark. All right. So in note for 7, why half mark? Because credit for identifying that there is a risk associated with the outsourcing the sales ledger. However, there is no explanation of this in terms of audit risk. The response does not address and assess risk. And in 8 point, uh, again half mark. Why so? Because the auditor credit for identifying that there is a risk associated with the threat of litigation. However, increased risk of losses is a business risk, not an audit risk. Full mark given though for relevant inquiry of the company lawyer that application of knowledge of I-7 37 to explain the risk would have been given credit. The mark for candidate for question 17 is 16 and a half out of 16, and this is not a pass mark. Now, let's move on for the candidate 2. Okay, general overheads are included in the valuation of the inventory. This leads to the overstatement of closing inventory. IS2 states that the cost of the inventory includes material, direct labor, and production overheads. 1 mark. Well, full mark awarded for identifying the risk and stating effect on the financial statement. However, an accounting treatment is not an auditor's response, so 0 for it, only 1 mark. Then 2, full inventory count will be held on 2, 3, and 4 April, and necessary adjustments will be made to the reflect post-year end movements. Inventory could be over or understated due to cut-off errors. So increase cut-off testing using goods receive notes and goods dispatch notes from 31st March to April 5. Wow, 2 marks, full. Full mark awarded for identify the risk and stating its effect on the financial statement. Full mark for a relevant auditor's response. Third one, the cost of purchasing the patent has been expensed. It should have been capitalized in accordance with IS 38 intangible assets and amortized. For the response, as it is probable the useful life is 3 years. Review the financial statements to ensure it's reflect this. Half mark. Credit giving for identifying there is a risk associated with the cost of the payment. Although how it should be treated is correct, it does not explain the audit risk. That is, the expense is overstated. The auditor's response is not appropriate because this is not how the patent has been treated in the financial statements. Now, the number 4. The teaming and letting frauds means the customer receipts have been wrongly allocated to older receivables. So request external confirmation of receivables balances, investigate all discrepancies which may include stolen cash. 1.5 mark. Wow. Credit for identifying that there is a risk associated with the fraud. However, the wrong allocation affects the financial statement is not explained. Full mark awarded for appropriate response with reason. Halfway through to the answer, right? Now, yeah, BlackBerry ran its sales department until 31st January exit, at which point the records were transferred to the service organization. There is a risk that records transferred were not complete and accurate. Therefore, receivables may be understated or overstated. Compare closing balance in BlackBerry's sales ledger as at 31st January with the service organization opening balance 2 marks full. Wow. So credit for identifying that there is a risk associated with the threat of litigation. However, there is no explanation in terms of audit risk. Full marks given for relevant equity of the company's lawyer. Okay. And then next, moving ahead, the financial accountant has dismissed and is threatened to sue the company further for unfair dismissal. There might be a present obligation and arising from the lawsuit. Discuss with legal advisor of the company to confirm the probability he wins the case. So 1.5 mark again for the 6th one because credit for identifying there is a risk associated with the lack of reconciliation. However, the explanation concerns business risk, not audit risk. Credit given for relevant response. Further detail was needed for the full mark example. Reconcile statement to ledger to ensure all transactions are recorded. Now, well, the new accountant will start in April and no supplier consideration was there, right? So, performed during the period difference between the company and suppliers balances could result delayed payments, loss of supply, credit limits are not respected. Now, response obtain permission from BlackBerry to send a payables calculation, only 1 mark, right? As discussed in the note 6. Now, note 7, BlackBerry has included a asset of 316 following the statement made by the liquidation of the bankrupt customer, as it is only likely on a disclosure should be included in the financial statement. So inspect cash book for after year end. Deposit if received, the treatment is correct. If not received, review the correspondence between BlackBerry and the liquidator asset whether the amount is likely to be received. IS 37 states that only highly probable inflows can be recorded as an asset before it is received. So 11 out of 16. Wow. Good marks, right? In this case. Now, question 18. Well, substantive procedures to perform obtain sufficient and appropriate audit evidence. So 1.6 out of 6.4, 30%, which is material. Some additional substantive procedures are needed. 0 marks here. You know why so 0 marks? Because this point is not relevant. Although the calculation of material is correct, it does not answer the question. Okay, number 2. Discuss with management how development cost has been valued. 0 marks. Why so? Because no mark given as discussed alone is inadequate as a substantive procedure. Number 3. Compare the opening figures of research and development with the year end research and development figure of the period year end and investigate any variances. 0 marks because this role learned point has no relevance to the given scenario, even though the requirement has been written out. The candidate has yet properly needed as a point of exam technique. It better to reduce the requirement to a concise heading on which to focus. Now, number 4, obtain evidence that the 1.9 million has actually been spent by checking for invoices of payments and casting the figures to ensure it add up 1.9 million. Note 4, marks given for stating how the evidence is obtained and what is achieved by the procedure. Number 5, verify that there are no other costs incurred in research and development that have been wrongly expensed by getting a comprehensive list of all expenses incurred to date in research and development and applying I-38 criteria. Wow, 0 marks again because no mark given as there is no indication how the criteria could be applied. The main concern related in the scenario is that costs are incorrectly capitalized and not that are currently expense. Okay. Confirm that 3 years useful life of the intangible assets corresponds with industry standard, half mark. Okay. Credit given for recognizing a benchmark in the industry for full mark was necessary to suggest how this could have been confirmed. For example, comparing with accounting policy notes in the financial statements of relevant companies. Verified that the relating information expense has been written off the statement of profit or loss. Again, half mark. Credit given for relevant disclosure to be agreed in the financial statements. So far, so good. Now for part B, substantive procedure to perform an appropriate audit evidence in relation to the depreciation of PPE. Okay. Well, obtain 0 mark because this point is not relevant, although the calculation of the materiality. Sorry, as for the note 3 note. Okay. Then Obtain a schedule of opening balances (PPE) and comparing with the closing balances of the period year. Investigate any variances. 0 marks because no marks, as these are all relevant points are not relevant to the matters identified regarding depreciation. Test experience a sample of the PPE by requesting the documents of ownership and right to use. 0 marks. Again, okay. Verify the basis of updated useful life, residual values, depreciation rates, methods used this current year, and ensure they are in alignment with the industry standard. Half mark. Why so? Because credit given for the recognition to verify the basis. However, it does not go for enough in describing how this would be verified. Now, recalculate the depreciation charge for every category of asset based on updated useful life, residual values, depreciation rates, methods to ensure no arithmetic inaccuracy exists. 1 mark. Mark given for a clear, substantive procedures and purpose that is relevant to the scenario. Then review the various disclosures made in the line of the changes made to the useful life and residual values and depreciation rates or methods. Credit given, but point is not sufficiently explicit on where the disclosures are where they should be reviewed against. Okay. Now for the part C, substantive procedures to perform to obtain sufficient and appropriate audit evidence in relation to the director's bonuses. Okay. So it's same as a node 11. Okay. And then recalculate bonus based on the draft year and assets, excluding intangible assets as of node 11. Then agree the amount of the bonus back to the payroll records. Credit given for a relevant procedures, but for full marks need to be more specific about the bonus amounts that could be agreed. And then inspect the director's service contract to confirm that any additional bonus to which the directors are not entitled has not been paid. No mark given as the confirmation of payment would be found in the cash book bank statement. Lastly, review the financial statement for disclosure of director's bonus. Credit given for relevant procedures, but for a full mark, this had to be tailored to the specific of the scenario, reviewed against the requirement of the local legislation. So the mark available to the candidate was 6 out of 15. Not passing, though. Then substantive procedures for research and development. Obtain list of research and development expenditure and cost to ensure accuracy. Half mark. So a credit given, but for the full mark needed to reconcile that the intangible asset was the main issue rather than an expense. Note 2, agree total to the general ledger to ensure completes. Similar to the note 1, there was more than a total expense to agree to the general ledger. A review cash forecast to confirm that finance is available to complete the developments. Each of these points applies to criteria of I 38 in a practical way and therefore worth a full mark. Okay. Then substantive procedures for PPE calculate the depreciation change, compare it with prior year, and investigate significant differences. 0 mark, okay, because credit given but point lacks sufficient detail for full mark. Note, then calculate depreciation chart for a sample of assets and check whether correct recorded in the correct current assets. 1 mark, the rote learned point is irrelevant to the given scenario. So 0 mark for it. Okay. Then calculate depreciation charge for a sample asset and whether correctly recorded in the non-current asset register. Each of these points sufficiently describes substantive procedure. Okay, that's specific to the scenario and therefore were the full mark. Lastly, here, discuss with the finance director about the arrangement for updated useful life with values and depreciation rates. Half mark because credit given for matter to be discussed with the finance director, but further consideration for the full mark. Now, for a sample of assets sold, check profit or loss, disposal to assets, validity of change in depreciation rates, and review the financial statement for the purpose of proper disclosure under IAS 16 property plan and equipment relating to changes in depreciation. For this, each of these points sufficiently describe the substantive procedures. This is a specific to the scenario and therefore worth a full mark each. 1 1 overall. 3 out of 5 and overall getting 3 out of 5. Okay. So far, so good. Right. And for us, that's the end of this section of double A Read the Mind of an Author. Hope you get it, how to write the scenarios, or how to write the answers and for the double A exams. And I hope this will help you. Good luck.